So welcome everybody to our second session of Judaism in the Vanguard of the Future, thinking about the interplay of Judaism and technology. We looked a couple of weeks ago, at the question of, are we using technology or is technology using us? And the long trajectory that we had of the way in which technology is very deeply rooted in Jewish texts and Jewish tradition, as I think that the line that I may have used at the very beginning, which was that technology is whatever you did not grow up with. So, you grew up with radio and television, so that was not hugely radical, but your parents, grandparents, all those questions, that was like, oh my God, how do I use this? How is this going to change everything? And seeing your kids, grandkids, and how comfortable they are with technology right now. What we're going to be looking at today are questions of artificial intelligence, which is something that I think many of us are very nervous about. I think even our kids are a little bit nervous about, and yet the next generation, the people who are growing up, they're going to be very, very comfortable with artificial intelligence. And so what I want to talk through a little bit through this morning are some of the questions of whether artificial intelligence is similar to what we might call a neshama, in Judaism, a neshama, and the creative nature of artificial intelligence. So I want to start by opening up a question of, how comfortable do you feel with artificial intelligence right now? And you can unmute and you can say, when you think about artificial intelligence, what are some of the things that you initially think about, whether that's positive or negative? When you first think of the phrase artificial intelligence, what comes up?
Fraud.
What was it? Fraud?
Fraud.
How so?
What they did this week with Biden's voice. It's fraud.
So
it fakes, and it's frightening.
So I don't know exactly what we're, because that's something that's happened in a few different ways, where there's artificial manipulation of images and text. There was actually within a week ago, last week, there was a test that you can do on the New York Times, and I can put this in the chat, of are you able to tell, is this an artificially created image, or is this a human image of different faces here? And I took the test, and I won't say how many were AI and how many were actual human beings, but I do a lot of this work. I got 2 out of 10. It is very, very difficult to be able to understand and know what is quote unquote real versus what is quote unquote artificial intelligence. And I think this is going to be a big question and challenge that's going to come up as new images come up, new video, new audio. That is something that's going to be very challenging here. Yeah, Barbara.
My computer was hacked into yesterday, and it went through Norton, and they told me that I owed $350 to a Norton subscription, which I never had a Norton subscription. And when I went online to get the telephone number for Norton, it led me right back to the scammer.
Yep.
The telephone number online for Norton, and I got to it, was a scammer.
Right.
I was on the phone with him for 2.5 hours, and then he very, very smooth. And he wanted me to connect to a policeman and take all my money out of the bank and put it in an overseas account to keep it quote unquote safe. And he had me so convinced that I almost did it.
So, and I think so one of the things that is challenging with artificial intelligence is that it's able to lower the cost and the barrier of being able to do things, right? You can create a good looking scam very easily. And one of the things that's actually interesting, and we'll look at this with some of these texts, is that one of the things that happens with at least artificial intelligence right now, there is a difference of what we're able to engage with text versus images versus video versus physical bodies. So it is a lot easier to be able to have artificial intelligence that looks very good in terms of text. You may have remembered something from about in the 50s or 60s. I think it might have been MIT, created a computer terminal called ELIZA, which was a text piece that was a quote unquote therapist. And it had about 6 prompts, which was, tell me more. That must be very difficult for you. I'm curious, expand on that, right? It was about 6 prompts, and people were spending hours typing into this terminal here because there was the text was able to look very real. If you've used something like ChatGPT, it is something that uses texts here. And so it's a lot harder to be able to know, is a text something that is created by artificial intelligence versus something that is very easy to be able to recognize. There's no human body that is an artificial intelligence. There are no robots. If you were to see a robot right now, you would know almost instantly if there's something that is created that is a physical body or something that is artificially created. So that's an element where we tend to fall into the natural fear of artificial intelligence. But one of the things that I think is also interesting to be able to think about is, just out of curiosity, how many of you feel like you are scared of artificial intelligence right now? Just raise your hand if you feel like you are scared. Yeah, most people are pretty scared about artificial intelligence. You're using artificial intelligence every day, and you're probably not even aware of it. If you drive somewhere that you don't know, how do you get there?
GPS.
GPS, right? You probably use Waze, right? You do not think when you put on your GPS. That is a form of artificial intelligence. When you are trying to decide what are you going to watch now on Netflix or Apple TV, there is an algorithm that suggests here is what you are going to buy. When you look at Amazon, what are you going to look at? There is artificial intelligence that is underneath everywhere here. And one of the things that I see, there's a link between artificial intelligence and a neshama. And we're going to talk about what exactly a neshama is in Judaism. That so much of artificial intelligence is something that is not physical. We're not able to actually see or know how things are being manifested. So Diane, when you were talking about the ways in which text and video and audio are manipulated, those are ways in which the manipulation doesn't matter that much, except it's going to have a real impact on our day-to-day lives, right? If you were to be able to see a fake video or a fake image of something, you may find that funny, or that may impact how you're going to vote, and which is then going to impact our in the quote unquote real world here. Yeah, Arlene.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is probably negligent on the part of our government and in terms of some of the services that we use on a regular basis is they should be sending out warning signals. Now, something very important happened the past week, which I thought was very interesting, and I was relieved. I was getting, along with a lot of other people that I was talking with, text messages about UPS packages that were trying to be delivered.
Yep.
Finally, on my computer, it popped up. UPS said, please ignore all of these. Do not respond. This is a scam. Okay? And I think we need to have more of that as we're going into the election year, that somebody has to put into place to remind everyone, please don't respond if you see the following items appear.
And so one of the things that is, and we talked about this actually a couple of weeks ago. Some people think about artificial intelligence and the fear that it's going to take over our lives and dominate and create. That doesn't scare me that much. What scares me more are these questions of manipulation, of scams, right? That's something where those are things in which the virtual world and the actual world interact. And one of the things that comes up, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is that technology always outpaces ethics. Anytime we try to regulate something, it's going to be too late. So what we're going to look at are a little bit of the bigger, longer term questions in a couple of minutes. So I want to be thinking, as we're talking throughout this morning, of the interplay of what are the exact immediate challenges in front of us, and what are the longer term questions. Judith, and then Diane, and then I want to start looking at a couple of texts here.
What scares me is what Arlene has suggested is totally impossible, because it is so vast. There's no way that we can get warnings from anywhere as to what's coming, as to what's being scammed. I think it's just out there. It's like in the universe. It's too big for us to get warnings about, I think.
So what you're talking about is actually like a Greek myth of the Hydra. If you know the story of Hercules and the Hydra, where anytime you try to cut down one of the Hydra's heads, two
Right.
new ones would pop up. And so trying to regulate every little piece of artificial intelligence, that is a fool's errand. I think trying to think through what are some of the larger questions, how do we approach these discussions from a larger ethical question? How do we deal with the things that we create? That's what the bigger question is. How can we actually create something? And a person that I highly recommend that you read, David Kalman, who worked at the Shalom Hartman Institute, he now works with Sinai and Synapses, said that actually the best analogy of artificial intelligence is that artificial intelligence is a little bit like a child. It's someone who is trying to learn a little bit of how do we navigate in this world, and we try to be able to give some parameters of how do we raise our children. And at the same time, you can't always control what your children are going to be. And as we're going to see in a couple of minutes, this is the analogy of when God creates humanity. God tries to be able to give humanity a little bit of freedom, and yet can't control the right and wrong. So yeah, Diane, and then I want to look at a few texts.
First of all, I think we've already lost control of this, and it's in the wrong hands much of the time. The other thing I wanted to say is that the most frightening thing about this is that in some sense, it takes away our free will, because it convinces us of things that are not true, and we act on them. And it, in some ways, can frighten us out of doing what we should be doing. And, there's a website called Neighbors in White Plains, and somebody posted, don't ever answer the phone if you don't know who it is, because they take your voice. They steal your voice. This is crazy.
So
I live like this.
So one of the questions, and thank you, Diane, I think one of the questions that is very interesting and very challenging with artificial intelligence is how much of artificial intelligence is a difference of degree and how much of it is a difference of kind. Because we have always been manipulated. We have always been succumbed to advertising, to texts, to propaganda. Look, the Torah was written to be able to achieve particular political and religious goals. There is an element, there is an element where you may say the Torah was written to manipulate, not necessarily in a bad way, but it was designed to be able to say, let's all worship one God and come to the temple in Jerusalem. We're going to try to write this, and we're going to have a text that's going to be written down that is trying to convince people to act in a different kind of way. And I don't want to answer this question right now because I don't think it's a necessarily an answerable question, but is artificial intelligence something that is it going to be something like the printing press, which completely changed the way in which we looked at the world and interacted with how we shared information? Or is it going to be just a little bit of a, changing, like the internet has changed things in a little bit. So what's different about artificial intelligence is that I think in my mind, we really grapple with, we really want to be able to say, we humans are special. We are unique. That's something that we've been thinking about since Genesis, of that we are created in the image of God, and there is something unique about being human that is different than other animals, that is different than other items in this universe. And sometimes it was being able to make tools, and then people discovered, well, that chimpanzees are able to do that. Or some people would say it's language. Well, there are other animals that are able to communicate, although I think language is a little bit different than communication. But I think for a lot of people, they said what makes humans unique is our intelligence. And artificial intelligence is raising this question of, are we actually human? I think that's one thing that scares us, because we can look at industrial complex. We can look at robots in a car factory and not think that, okay, this may be human. I'm interacting with a human being. It may replace our workforce. It replaces what our workforce is. But when you see a robot that does one thing over and over and over again and stamps it and stamps it and stamps it and stamps it and stamps it, we're not worried that we're going to lose our humanity. But when we see text messages or emails or see pictures or videos, that's something that is particularly human. And that's something that I think is why artificial intelligence has become a little bit scary for a lot of people here. So I actually want to look at a few texts of these questions, of starting actually with this question of what it means to be human. And is everyone able to see this text on my screen? Great. So can I get someone to read? This is from Genesis 2:7. This is from the very beginning of Genesis. This is after God has created Adam and placed him in the Garden of Eden. Can I get someone to unmute and read in Genesis 2:7 here? Go ahead, Diane. Thank you.
God Adonai formed the human from the soil's humus, blowing into his nostrils the breath of life. The human became a living being.
Terrific. Thank you. So if you notice that I use the word hummus, this is actually from not hummus, it's not the Middle Eastern dip. Hummus, it's like the ground. The reason that this text uses hummus is because the word Adam, and if you can see this here, this is the Hebrew word for Adam, is related to Adamah, which means the ground. In the same way the human and humus are related words, human was created from something physical here. Adam was created something very physically here, and Adonai then blew his nostrils the breath of life, and the Hebrew word is nefesh chaya, and became a living being. Nishmat chayim is the breath of life, and a nefesh chaya. There are two Hebrew words that you may have heard of the word neshama and nefesh. Those are words that are often used to describe the word soul, and yet they have different aspects here. When you think about a breath of the neshama, literally to breathe is linshom. Why does the breath become the instrument of how God is created? Where do you see breath as an element as linking with God?
Blowing into his nostrils the breath of life.
So why breath, though, specifically? God could have stuck something in God's ear, or God also takes Adam's rib out. Why breathing?
It's ephemeral.
Right, it's ephemeral, right? You can't see it. Yep, that's so right. It is something that is very quick, and you're not able to see it here. Yeah, Diane. Oh, you're muted though.
Inanimate objects don't breathe.
Right, right. So there's something that when it's the ground, God puts human from the ground and it's physical and it's like a rock. And then when God breathes in, that's what makes him a living being. Yeah, Judith, go ahead.
Breath, you can't live without breath. If you stop breathing, you're gone. It's like, it's something that one feels.
Right.
It's your life force, breath.
Right. It is a life force. It is something that's a way in which people decide, has somebody died if they stopped breathing. That's where that comes in. Yeah, Karen.
I was going to just go on, elaborate on the ephemeral, which is that it doesn't, in a simple way, you could say it doesn't have any weight, shape, appearance. It's something that you would associate with a soul as not something you could put your finger on, but nevertheless would somehow. I also would have to put the other part of the soul is, great dignity, something that we allows us to give dignity to a person. Anyhow.
Yes.
You use the word that we're going to come back in a few different times, which is the word soul. That's also something where there's the breath or the soul. It's ephemeral. It's not visible. It also, we would argue, and we're going to see a text here in a couple of minutes, it's what animates us. Your soul is what, at least in traditional Judaism, we would say guides how we act in ways that we don't always understand necessarily. Which, by the way, links to questions of artificial intelligence. Is artificial intelligence a soul here? Is that an analogy? Everything that exists with our text messages, with the algorithms that we have, all the ones and zeros that guide who we are, we don't actually see that. Even the people who are working in Silicon Valley and develop all these new technological questions here of artificial intelligence, they don't necessarily understand how it works. It is more complex than what humans are able to understand. They're not able to say, oh, this was this line of code that helped us understand here. That there is this question of AI, artificial intelligence, as a neshama, as something that is animating and could be defined as a soul that we're going to look at. And it comes back to how does the soul and the body come back together? We're going to look at that in a couple of minutes. I want to also talk for a second of this word nefesh, which is sometimes also described as the word soul. The nefesh. Nefesh is sometimes described as this sort of ephemeral soul. That's actually a terrible translation. Nefesh actually means much more of the physical manifestation of something. So Rashi, who is the great commentator who looks at this text of God creating Adam, if you see, also cattle and beasts are called nefesh chaya, and you can actually see it in a few other texts. That even behema, which is a cattle, or beast, chaya. If you grew up with Yiddish speaking parents, they may have called you a vilda chaya in Yiddish, which means a wild animal. A vilda chaya. Chaya means living, like a living beast. Something is living, but it is different than as Rashi says, the nefesh of humanity is the more developed of all of them, because the humans were granted understanding and speech, which again comes to this question of why AI has become so threatening for us, because we celebrate that language and speech is only humans. We have claimed that. And there's a difference of what, for example, bees or other animals or birds, they're able to communicate. They're able to communicate, but in only very limited kinds of ways. Yuval Harari, who's written a couple of books about Homo Deus, and he's written Sapiens, said what makes humans unique is that we are able to imagine. we're able to talk about things that don't actually exist. The reason that humans are able to create something, what Harari talks about, that there's animals are able to communicate about things that are physically right here. Humans are the only ones who are able to talk about things that exist only because we all agree that they exist. So, for example, the examples that Harari talks about are money, religion, and nations. Those things don't actually exist in this real world. They exist in this real world because we say they exist in this real world. And this is why artificial intelligence has started to bleed into some of these different questions. So when Diane, when you were talking about these questions of how AI is going to influence the 2024 election. So this is not a trick question, but who was the legitimately elected president in 2020? This is not a trick question. Who was actually elected the president here?
Biden.
Biden. Why?
Because he got the most electoral votes.
Why?
Because we said so.
Right, because we said so. Right, there's a difference of Biden being the president as a social fact. That is a fact because we all agreed that these are the rules of how this is going to work, versus being able to say as a natural fact, if I take this phone and I drop it, that's going to fall. Social facts exist only because language says they exist. So artificial intelligence is now bleeds into these questions of natural facts versus social facts. If artificial intelligence changes our language, influences our language, which influences our thinking, that is going to lead to physical consequences in the real world. I think that's why people are very nervous here. There is we don't understand all of the inner workings of the ways in which the social world is created. And so technology, and particularly artificial intelligence, that is something that creates a social fact. That is something that exists only in our mental representations. It doesn't exist in the physical world. Comes to Karen, of your question of a soul. We believe we have a soul because our soul animates us, but that exists only because we talk about having a language here. I think there's a reason that we humans tend to have higher value than other animals here, because we view that we are created in the image of God. As much as we may love our pets and our dogs and our reptiles, they don't have the same level of thinking and imagination and soul that other animals do. So I'm gonna pause. I've been talking for a long time, so I want to pause before we look at a couple more texts of questions and reactions and thoughts.
Something.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to.
Yeah, David. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, excuse me. I just wanted to say, it's certainly true of the latest advances in artificial intelligence, notably ChatGPT and what are called large language models, that no one really understands how they work other than the very general principles. And that's going to remain true. I mean, in some sense, they're just based on scanning billions of lines of text, which can be obtained from the internet. But what they come up with is to ordinary humans impenetrable. And the thing is, they're growing at ever increasing rates.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot barely comprehend now. And it's also the case they're going to soon, if they have not already, escape any possible ways of meaningful regulation by the government.
Mhm.
It's just growing so fast. And all we really know for sure is it's going to create immense amounts of wealth. But that's the only true thing we can say about it. Everything else, in some sense, it's just too much to comprehend in some sense.
Right. I mean, that's this question of, can we not only can we control what we create, which I think the answer is no. I think some of the question is, can we understand what we create? I think that's where this challenge is going to come in. Artificial intelligence is creating things that we can't fully understand right now. And yet there are physical limitations of what artificial intelligence is able to do. I don't know if you remember, a little over 10 years ago, there was a competition on Jeopardy, if people saw this, of Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter and Watson, which was an artificial intelligence computer. I don't know if you remember that. And what people may remember is that Watson beat Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter, who were the two greatest Jeopardy champions at the time. And Ken Jennings wrote it as his final Jeopardy: "I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords." Right? We're worried that our computers are going to be able to take this over. What people don't remember about Watson, what people remember a lot is, oh my God, the computers are going to take over. First of all, that was more than 10 years ago, and the computers have not taken over. There's a lot of predictions of, there's always of, the computers are going to take over, the computers are going to take over, the computers are going to take over, and they still haven't. But does anyone know or remember where that episode of Jeopardy was filmed? It ended up being filmed in, actually, it was filmed in Armonk. It was filmed at the IBM laboratories. Why? Because it required so much computing power to be able to keep the fans cool that they needed an entirely separate room to be able to know and understand and process some of these questions. What humans need to be able to do to process this is to get 2,000 calories a day. Everything that we're able to process, Watson needed an entire room full of computing power to be able to make these questions. We're able to do it right here with 2,000 calories a day. That's, I think, why I'm not terrified that computers are going to necessarily take over, because it requires, there is so much more power that is needed, that, again, that is, I think, in many ways what makes humans unique. It's not necessarily our ability to use language, it's our ability to be able to use language using as little energy as we actually do. Judith, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, the word neshama and the ascribing soul, to me, is divine. There's a divinity in soul. After Vachamru, God rested Vayinafash, he was refreshed, his soul, or the God soul, not his, it relates to the divinity, something that's beyond beyond technology. And I know that this course is we're talking about religion and science, but to use the word soul is almost, it doesn't work. It's going too far into the most important, to me, part of our religion is what's in our soul. It's a very unique term that's being gotten something that's a little too technological.
You're raising a huge question and a fantastic question, which is also, it's almost asking this question of, does AI have rights? Right? So much of Jewish text and American law, and we'll talk about this in just a second, of, do we have rights? And that's you're looking at it from this question, and I think because I don't necessarily know if AI has a neshama or not. I think that's what I want to be pushing people on from both directions. There are two ways to think of a neshama. One is from the top down. God gives us our neshama. That's where it comes from. That is a divine that's what this text says. It comes, it's as you said, it's a divine spark. Our neshama is something that we have created here. Or is a neshama, in which case, by the way, if a neshama is divine and given from God to us, AI does not have a neshama. Period. Right? That because it's only divine. Or is a neshama define something from the bottom up of what we are doing and what we're able to do and be able to think and act and create? Does that actually lead to questions of having a neshama here? And it's not just, by the way, artificial intelligence. Does artificial intelligence have a neshama? It's also a question that we can grapple with. As I started with this question of, do animals have a neshama? So if you want to think of questions of what makes, one thing we can think about what makes humans unique is having certain rights. We talk about human rights, that everyone is created equal, or in Genesis 2, we're all created in the image of God. We're all humans, and therefore we all have a level of equality. So the question, does AI have rights? Does AI have responsibilities? There's an analogy that's coming at that actually was in the last couple of years with a news story that was in the Atlantic. Oh, and I see a dog right back here. There was an article in the Atlantic a couple of years ago that dealt with something very local to us. How many of you ever been to the Bronx Zoo? How many of you have seen Happy the elephant? Who is the elephant in the Bronx Zoo? This is a story here where there was a question where Happy was one of the elephants in the Bronx Zoo, and there were animal rights activists who were trying to be able to say Happy should have the rights of a human being, because Happy is self-aware. They ended up saying no, Happy did not have those particular rights here. But that is that same kind of question of it's really this question of, is a neshama what something is that makes humans unique? Does Happy the elephant have a neshama? In my mind, is very similar to the question of, does artificial intelligence have a neshama? These are non-human things that have rights, that seem to act in a way that is somewhat human-like. It's not the same as a human. It's not a binary decision. It's a scale here. Yeah, Mark.
Oh, at least in this world, neshama is not a freestanding entity. It's part of it. Neshama only relates to a body. Now, if we talk about the world to come, there's all kinds of controversy about that, but we're not. We're talking about this world. So I think we have a lot more to say in common with Happy than we do with AI.
Right. Well, and so that's, I think, what's different with Happy versus AI, and where there's this question of the neshama. And actually, I want to, maybe Mark, you can read for us a little bit of this text I'm about to show. That Happy lives in the physical world. We can understand Happy trying to want to eat hay, Happy not trying to want to break through a fence, Happy wanting to be able to have a mate. AI doesn't have those elements. Although, again, like this is one of those things where when we have texts, it's hard to be able to see that line. About a year ago, I don't know if you remember, there was a thing in the New York Times where I don't remember, the reporter had an AI with Microsoft Sydney, where Sydney kept saying, I want to be human, and tried to convince the reporter that the reporter actually doesn't love his wife. He loves Sydney, and he should divorce his wife and be with Sydney because I understand you. And there are people who feel more connected to artificial intelligence than they do to other physical beings. Yeah, Sandra. Oh, you're muted though, Sandra.
So I've been asking myself, does my little puppy that I love so much have a soul? Does she have a neshama? She exhibits behaviors that I think are loving, But I still have to, but I'm thinking in answer to my question, what she has is different from the neshama that God breathed into humans.
And as an analogy too, right? That we can say it is, both things can be true. I can say the neshama for me is different than the neshama of my dog, and I can love my dog. I can have a relationship with my dog, even if it doesn't have a neshama. In the same way, I can have a relationship with AI, with an artificial intelligence element, without having a neshama.
Okay, that's good.
Right? It's right. There's so I want to look at.
I don't know if I would call that a relationship,
Okay.
because AI can't independently initiate it. AI can't decide I'm not going to do it anymore. Somebody has to do that for AI.
So where you're linking into is this question. This is why this is a question of, is it a difference of degree or kind? One of the challenges that's facing artificial intelligence right now, some people are very scared about this, others are not. I am, by the way, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I am not particularly scared about this, but this is something that they talk about, where they talk about what's called the alignment problem, or sometimes the paperclip problem. So the way it's phrased is, imagine there is a code that is said, I want to make AI, I want you to make as many paper clips as possible. And what may happen is the AI may say, well, the best way to be able to make all these paper clips, if I need to make as many paper clips as possible, the best thing I can do is to kill all the humans and turn them into paper clips. That is like, if the AI is programmed, make as many paper clips as you can. Well, humans are made of lots of great atoms. Let's kill all the humans. There are concerns of unintended consequences. How do we program something, and again, not being able to control what happens down the road. And again, this was an example that happened even a couple of years ago, where I think it was Microsoft was trained to be able to use Twitter and create social media that mimicked what was happening on social media. And within about an hour, it was spreading Nazi propaganda and white supremacist language and racism. And they didn't control it. They had to stop it. And right, because you don't know exactly, there's what humans are going to ultimately create, but you don't always know what's the end result. Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that two things we've been talking about are emotions and consciousness. And I mean, those two things I think contribute to what we call our neshama. And as far as I know, AI does not have those two things, but can we be sure?
Well, and emotion, this is a little bit scary to say this, but emotion is an algorithm. It's an algorithm that works in your brain, but emotion is an algorithm that, to be able to say, when you're feeling X, this is what should happen in your body. If you're feeling scared, let me build up a little bit of the right neurotransmitters to be able to fight or flight. If I'm feeling happy, let me fill this up with the right neurotransmitters and the dopamine. If I'm feeling angry, let me get ready to be able to attack. Our emotions are algorithms here. And by the way, artificial intelligence can motivate particular emotions in our body. So, when Diane, when you were talking about artificial intelligence and the way things are manipulated to talk about Biden or false information, what ends up getting shared the most on social media are things that are emotionally resonant, and particularly things that create a level of anger and disgust. And that spreads very, very quickly. So does AI have an emotion? maybe yes, maybe no. But what if what is created by artificial intelligence then animates a particular emotion, which then has a impact in the real world? So I want to actually look at
I
this.
have a question. I
Yeah.
have a question about this. Emotions are also motivated by certain things. For example, if you want to do something you can't, you'll feel angry or rageful.
Right.
So can AI be programmed to respond in a certain way if something they are trying to do is impeded and is interfered with?
So this is also a question, and oh boy, I keep saying we're going to look at this next. So one of the things that is, I don't want to say, I would say it's probably unique about humans, but I don't necessarily. It is a way in which we humans communicate, which is what's going on in our head. That's internal, and that exists only in our mind. But the words that we say and the tone that we use, that's how other people experience it. So can artificial intelligence have an internal monologue? I think the answer is no. Could they write something or show something or create something with tone and images that will then impact us? I think that's a possibility, right? If you were to be able to see something on social media that makes you angry or makes you happy or makes you laugh, you don't care if that was created by artificial intelligence or not. That is going to create an emotional reaction in you. So it almost doesn't really matter whether the artificial intelligence has an internal monologue or thoughts. I think the question is, how is that going to impact us as human beings? Does that make sense? Even if it's not a two-way street, even if it's not, we can be talking with a chat bot, and okay, but that's but the chat bot then may try to create something for us. Diane, and then I want to look at this text.
Okay. I want to know if it can learn. We know it does what it's programmed to do, and the AI that went on and picked out all the Nazi stuff and he was doing what he was programmed to do. It was doing what it was programmed to do. But what frightens me about it is I don't know if it can learn. Can it go rogue? Can it do what it wants?
But that's what they call it about the alignment question. And yes, I mean that is one of the questions of artificial intelligence is something that's almost by definition, it's able to learn from itself, and it's learning from other aspects. So there was a big article in the Times that you may have seen where the New York Times was suing OpenAI because if you were to type in something along the lines of, give me an image of golden robot from science fiction movie, and it immediately comes up of C-3PO in Star Wars. There was one of create an image of, there was one just today of create an image of Batman villain, and it's a picture of the Joker. This is why the Writers Guild of America was on strike, because they were able to, a lot of artificial intelligence is able to scrape, and it's called scraping, learning from what other people have created. So I think that the other question is not just can AI learn, but is it going to replace what humans are doing? That's when we talk about owning our creative nature of this, that's where a big challenge is going to come in.
I think I was in a different lane here. I was thinking more in terms of holding someone responsible for what happens. So we have Joe Biden being mimicked by AI and trying to influence the vote. And somebody programmed it to do that.
Yep.
The person who did that is responsible. But if AI can go rogue and then start doing what it wants, who's responsible?
That is exactly the text I want to look at right here. So this is from a text. Thank you, Diane. This is exactly the text that I want to go to, because this is a question that the rabbis grapple with, of who's responsible for different things. So this is a text from the Babylonian Talmud, from Sanhedrin, where it's a collection of different arguments from, they call him Rabbi Judah Hanasi. He was actually the redactor of what's called the Mishnah, which is the basis of Jewish law. He was such an important rabbi that he was just called Rabbi. And a few different times he argues with a person who's described as Antoninus, who was the Roman emperor. If you know your Roman history, there never was a Roman emperor named Antoninus. Some people think this may represent Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor and a philosopher here. But what this really represents are arguments between a Jewish way of thinking and a Greco-Roman way of thinking. And they argue back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it happens in a lot of different ways. Judah Hanasi always ends up winning the argument, but it tries to poke some of the holes of the Greco-Roman world of thinking and the Jewish way of thinking. So this comes up with questions here of a section where Judah Hanasi is talking with other Gentile leaders. So can I get someone who hasn't had a chance to be able to read as much, to unmute and start reading a little bit of, and I'm going to stop you a few times, from Sanhedrin 91a.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Apropos exchanges with prominent Gentile leaders, the Gemara cites an exchange where Antoninus,
Yep.
the Roman emperor, said to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, "The body and the soul are able to exempt themselves from judgments for their sins."
So what they're saying so Antoninus says, when someone dies, both the body and the soul can say, "Not my fault." Okay, keep going.
The body says,
Well, yeah, how so? Yep.
how so? The body says, "The soul sinned, as from the day of my death, when it departed from me. I am cast like a silent stone in the grave, and do not sin."
All right. So what does the body say? What does the body say? Not my fault.
Right.
Why? How come?
Because
Soul left.
silent stone,
So
silence
what?
like a stone.
Right. The body's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. The soul is what animates it. So I can't do anything. All right, keep going.
And the soul says, "The body sinned, as from the day that I departed from it. I am flying in the air like a bird, incapable of sin."
Great. So what does the soul say? Why does the soul say, "Not my fault"?
Soul can't
Because it's
act in
not
the physical
related to
world.
the body anymore.
Yep, the soul's not going to. Yep. And Diane, what were you going to say?
Soul can't act on the physical world.
Right. The soul is up there in the ether, just flying around like a bird. I can't do anything. I can't animate anything. I'm like a breath. I'm flying in the air like a bird. I'm just going to say, just so you know, the second part it's a little bit. The language is a little bit. The phrase that we use now is ableist. I apologize if this is uncomfortable language. It may be fine for you. It may not be as fine. This is the language that was written there, so just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. Can I get someone to pick up? Someone else to pick up what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said? Oh, go ahead, Diane. Oh, you're muted though.
Right? Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to him, "I will tell you a parable. To what is this matter comparable? It is comparable to the king of flesh and blood, who had a fine orchard, and in it there were fine first fruits of a fig tree. And he stationed 2 guards in the orchard, one lame, who was unable to walk, and one blind. Neither was capable of reaching the fruit on the trees in the orchard without the assistance of the other.
All right, so the king, now we can ask this question, why does the king have 2 guards, one who can't see and one who can't walk? Doesn't sound like a particularly good king to be able to have these guards, but in any event, he puts them there. One can't see, one can't walk. Okay, keep going.
The lame person said to the blind person, I see fine first fruits of a fig tree in the orchard. Come and place me upon your shoulders. I will guide you to the tree, and we will bring the figs to eat them. The lame person rode upon the shoulders of the blind person, and they brought the figs and ate them.
Right, so what happened?
Joined together and helped each other.
Right, so the person who couldn't walk goes on to the shoulders of the blind person and joins them together, and they eat the figs. They violate this rule here. They violate the king's command. Can I get a new person to be able to read here?
Sometime later, the owner of the orchard came to the orchard. He said to the guards, the fine first fruits of a fig tree that were in the orchard, where are they? The lame person said, do I have any legs with which I would be able to walk and take the figs? The blind person said, do I have any eyes with which I would be able to see the way to the figs? What did the owner of the orchard do? He placed the lame person upon the shoulders of the blind person, just as they did when they stole the figs, and he judged them as one.
So what happens?
He exposed their deception, actually.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
They're both culpable then, I guess, for joining together, or they're inseparable in this act.
Right. Each one is able to say independently, I can't do anything. Why? Like, not my fault, not my fault, not my fault. But then the owner of the orchard puts them together, and the combination, that's where the judgment comes in. Being able to judge only one or the other, of course, neither of them are culpable. Neither of them are responsible. But putting them together, the judgment, the unity together, that's where the judgment comes in. So if I get one more person,
they both had the will to do it.
Right. They both wanted to be able to. Right. They both wanted to be able to say, I want to do something wrong. And they had the motivation to be able to do that. Terrific. Thank you. Can I get another person to read here?
So too the Holy One, blessed be God, brings the soul on the day of judgment and casts it back into the body as they were when they sinned. And God judges them as one, as it is stated, God calls to the heavens above and to the earth that God may judge God's people. God calls to the heavens above. This is the soul, which is heavenly. And to the earth that God may judge God's people. This is the body, which is earthly.
Terrific. Thank you. So, how do you see this connecting with questions of AI and responsibility with AI? And coming back to this question of, AI having a neshama.
Well, one thing I'd say is the people, I think this is implying that the people who created AI, who gave it its being, are responsible in some way.
So the people who created, I think that's that who is responsible? It's the ones who are creating it. I think that's that is definitely an element of that for sure. Thank you.
So that's a neshama of our creation.
So that's an interesting, that's a fascinating perspective of like, does our creation have a neshama? Right? We have a neshama because God put the soul in us. Are we putting a neshama inside of AI? Right? In which case, that's a question of, are we acting with godlike powers? Which is why I think we grapple with this question of, are we taking over? Are we playing God? Being able to
is God
create.
responsible for all the bad things that human beings do?
We are or we're not?
That's a question. Is God responsible for what human beings do, all the destruction that we do?
So right. So that's we tend, at least, and in Judaism, we tend not to blame God for all the things that we did wrong. Human beings are the ones who are responsible for their choices. So, analogously, is AI responsible for its problems?
This is very tough.
Right? I told you this is not going to be an easy question.
But AI is our creation.
Yeah, right. So who, right? So does that then mean that God is ultimately responsible for everything that has happened in this world? Like who?
We like
us
to
free
say
will.
that we were created in God's image, and all of us holds within us some godlike peace. So if we follow that thinking through, then as we create AI, it's kind of analogous to God's creation of us.
Right. I think it is very much, and we're going to see it in the next text. It is. I think it very much is an analogy, which is why this question of, does AI have a neshama, of something that was created by something else, that then has something that is ephemeral, that animates us, that is not physical, that we don't always understand, that may make its own decisions, that may hurt its creator. There's a lot. I'm not willing yet to say that AI has a neshama, but this is why these are questions that are coming up right now.